Hetepu, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, Haroon Nefer. This is Qesankh with another exciting video for you. And in this video, we're going to be talking about shadow work with Norma Cohn. It's going to be awesome. But before we broach that subject, I want you to hit the like button. And if this is your first time to my channel, hit the subscribe button to get notifications on when I go live and when I upload recorded videos. And if you want to know more about my spiritual teachings, you can scroll down below, click on any one of the 4 links. They're free ebooks. You can download them today and start reading them. Again, it's absolutely free. However, that doesn't wet your whistle. You can become a Patreon supporter for as little as $1, $5, or $20 per month. You'll get exclusive access to instructional videos on the spiritual, on the esoteric, videos on how to do astral projection, how to do lucid dreaming, how to contact the ancestors, proper meditation techniques, how to breathe proper to make you less emotional. And if you are a Docere level supporter, you'll get all your Oracle readings for free. So become a Patreon supporter today. You can cancel at any time. Last but not least, share this video with family and friends so that we can get the revolution started. So, Haroon Nefer, Namaste, Grand Rising. How are you all today? We have a special guest today, and I'm sorry we're a little late. We had a little bit of technical difficulties. But we have a special guest today. Her name is Norma Cohn, and she specializes in trauma work by working with your shadow. Now, I've talked a little bit about that on my channel before, but I'm going to let her really dive deep into that and give you a background on what shadow work is, why it's important for us to work on the traumas that we have experienced in this life and in previous lives. So with that said, I am going to bring in Norma. Hi, Norma. How are you?
Hi, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Glad to have you. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I want to first start out by asking you, just to get some context for our viewers, what is shadow work?
Absolutely. So shadow work basically is the process of finding what is on the subconscious mind, what aspects or what reasons, what beliefs, what behaviors are there that you're not aware consciously of them. So it's the process of exploring so that you can put yourself together. It's inner work, inner child work, but in the perspective of going into the roots, going into the reasons why something is happening in the current life, or to understand whether it could be pain, trauma, it could be a pattern of behavior that you just don't get it. For example, smoking or shopping, excessive shopping, or literally like the lack of action or lack of motivation. Everything has a root cause. So what I do in shadow work is to help you find out those answers from the subconscious. So basically, we dig into the roots of the tree.
That's good. You know, I studied a little bit of Jung and Freud had the ego, the superego, the id, and all that. How would you classify the shadow? Is that part of the ego, or?
Well, yes, it's always part of the splits, right? The conscious and unconscious mind is both. However, I guess if you want to attach it to someone who introduced the topic of shadow work, I would say Carl Jung was the first one to introduce the concept of shadow work. So referring to look into, again, to the subconscious to try to understand the self into a more complex pattern. He believes in the shadows, the parts that you don't know about yourself. So the aspects or personalities or concepts about yourself, identifications of the self. So it's always part of the ego, because it's the ego, the one that continues to split the self. So it's more about understanding the whys of what you do.
Yeah. And how did, where did the shadow come from? Is it always been with us? Is it something we create?
But both, both. It is with us because we live in this world of duality, right? We live here, so we already come split into two perspectives, conscious and unconscious, or physical and non-physical. So it's always there with us. But yes, we do create more of it as we grow. We adapt. We learn through adaptation that perhaps an aspect of ourselves is acceptable or an aspect of ourselves is not acceptable, and so we learn to adapt based on our needs or based on the environment that we're in, whether our parents, our friends. We show the aspect of ourselves that is acceptable, and by doing that, at the same time we reject the aspect that is not acceptable in the moment. So that's the process of fragmentation, or splitting ourselves, or creating more of those shadows. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got you. Take us back to how did you get into shadow work? Like,
Oh my God. I think I have always been in this journey. I mean, as long as I remember, I was always interested on understanding humans' behavior. However, life journeys has taken me a little bit different. I went to school to study early childhood special education to try to understand children, right? But then as I went through life, I ended up having a car accident. I would say that 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, and that led me to lose my ability to walk, which led me to have surgery, which led me to have a near-death experience.
oh,
So yes, and so after that, after have I had that experience in which I pretty much review my life and the things that I still needed to accomplish before I exited this life. After that experience, I came back, and it's almost like I made a my focus to understand myself and understand more of why the behaviors, why the beliefs, why the even my interactions with relatives, with friends, and things like that. So I made it, and so because of that, it led me to find my path in a more direct way as I continue to search and search. Yeah.
and you're very good at what you do. I heard your talk at the group, and I was amazed at just how in depth you went, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, which I told you. Um, as far as the, you know, is this something that we should have been practicing, but somehow it fell off the culture, or like, why aren't we doing this? I mean, because modern psychology is really predicated upon Freud, which is, you sit down at the couch, he guides you with questions, but you don't really go into like the whole aspect of the shadow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's preferences, right? But yes, modern psychology focus around those concepts, and so it's different philosophy. This is more of the alternative, what we consider alternative healing techniques, or alternative modalities. Usually, you explore this under um, anything related to inner child work, anything related to like hypnosis or parts works, or anything like that will lead you into this kind of process. Different alternative modalities, biocodification, anything like that. They usually look at those shadows. But I mean, growing up is just we adapt. It's just the norm. I mean, we've done it for centuries and centuries, that we adapt based on what is needed, because we're beings of survival, we're beings of togetherness, we're beings of connection. So subconsciously we're always looking to connect, to belong, to be part of. And so in order for us to be part of, or to belong, if something is not acceptable within you, we're going to suppress, deny, disown that aspect of ourselves, so that we can then therefore connect with the person that is in front of us, right? And so we unconsciously do this. And so this is a habit of humanity for centuries and centuries. But again, it makes sense, because this is duality. This is the place of duality on earth. Earth is this world is a duality. So we already come with a polarized, we come with two perspectives all the time: cold, hot, above or below. I mean, there's always the opposite. So because there is the opposite, it's the same thing with us. We constantly project what is accepted, and deny what is not. Growing up, we learned that, because I mentioned in the group, one of our biggest needs is connection, belonging, and to be close. And so to earn that, we're gonna do whatever it takes for us to earn that, whether that is for our favor or against us. And so we're going to connect. We either connect through a happy feeling, or we connect through sadness, but we're always connecting. And so by doing so, we constantly reject the aspect that don't necessarily believe that or accepts that or wants to be that. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about this because you said something that was very interesting about this suppression. So, are
Mhm.
we going through our daily lives and suppressing certain things that we may not like or is
Mhm.
traumatic? And what is the effect of doing that?
So in the long terms, I mean, all of the suppression of the self, it translates to I don't like myself, I hate myself eventually, and we're very uncomfortable with ourselves or being our authentic selves. That's one. The other thing is that if as we continue to suppress, deny, disown our emotions, our inner selves, eventually that becomes energy that is trapped in the body and it becomes illness. The everything in life has a progression, right? There is the non-physical and the physical. So emotions are non-physical in the sense that they're you can see them. Sometimes you see them visually, but the energy aspect you don't see them, and that energy is corresponding usually to an organ in the body. And so the more you suppress those emotions, the most you deny those aspects, those desires of yourself, which it all leads to emotions, the more the body suppresses either the energy or it condenses the energy and it becomes an illness. So it affects health basically. I
Well,
mean,
let's.
the
Oh,
way.
I remember you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I remember you talking about that. And that was one of the most fascinating parts about it. How it kind of mushrooms into this health disorder,
Yes,
And that's is that true? Is that
it
really what
absolutely is.
happens?
Yeah, every emotion, every I mean every disease, if you trace it back, it always goes back to an emotion because the organs regulate or are associated with emotions. And so anything that is, oh, I'm sorry, my phone. Anything that is um, a painful or that you have an experience that, for example, literally, I just got off the phone with my brother. He just discovered he has diabetes, right? And he lost like 20 pounds just in 2 months. And I'm like, wow, who the heck is that? I haven't seen him. I didn't grow up with him. So I don't have a close relationship with him. And so when we start looking into just a few minutes ago, his story of the life he hold and was never acknowledged, all the pain and when he felt into it immediately took us to an experience where he when my mother is pregnant with him and my or his father, which is not my father, his father is beating on my mother, and so all of that went into him being in the womb. I mean,
Mm,
that's how the pain right now, feeling into the pain took us there. And it is affecting him because today he has all these illnesses manifested in his body because the pain was there for however long. And according to what we just did, the mind took us to that experience. So the brain is associating that beginning, that experience in the womb where he was traumatized by my mother being beat up by her ex husband or husband at the time, and he hold on to that pain in his body. I mean, how would he even know to heal that unless he does this type of work, shadow work, right? To feel into the emotion and then take it, the subconscious mind immediately will take you to connect to the very first time he felt that way, and that was in this case the pregnancy of my mother. There would be no way for him to know unless he pays attention to his emotions, unless he pays attention to what he's feeling. And so there's always a connection. So just like in a tree grows and it has roots. The deeper the roots, the better the tree grows, right?
yeah.
The world teaches, or psychology teaches us to focus on the leaves and the branches. Rarely did they ever say, well, let's see, where did they come from? Where does the roots come from? And shadow work is the process of going into the roots to find out why that branch is twisted and is not producing green leaves. Let's go look to the roots. And so that's what this work does. It allows us to go and do that kind of work. So yes, when we don't and when we suppress those emotions, when we deny ourselves the desires that we have sometimes, it will create an effect in the body and it translates into illnesses or diseases.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hold on a second. I want to get your take on this. It's a quote
Mhm.
by a famous Indian seafood, if you want to call him, or sage,
Mhm.
Judah
Yeah, yeah,
Krishnamurti.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, you're familiar with it, right? Let me see if I can bring it up on my screen, okay? Because I got all kinds of crazy stuff on my screen. Okay, so what he says is this: it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. What do you think about that?
It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to profoundly sick society. Exactly, right? Exactly. Because you cannot be well if you're adjusting to the society or to the situations. It's going to affect you. I mean, right now, we have it right now. There is so much fear for the last few years, so much fear provoke into society, or input into society. All this craziness happening in the world. And what is people panicking? I mean, just in my office, the increase of suicidal
Oh, wow.
is crazy, especially among teenagers right now, because they're going to an identity crisis. And they sell this idea that if you do this, you're gonna feel better, and when they get there, actually they feel worse.
Mm,
And so suicide is just increasing in
mm.
Nevada, especially Nevada, because we already have one of the highest percentages on depression in the country.
Do you think this is post COVID is caused by COVID, or is it just?
Absolutely,
Oh,
absolutely. I mean, COVID, what the experience of COVID did, it was like it almost separated two energies: the ones that are completely um, or started or want to do shadow work, or any type of healing, and any type of, let's be aware, let's call it awareness, forget about shadow, let's call it awareness. It created two groups: the group that wants to go into awareness and understand the consciousness and all that, and the ones that are completely unconscious, right? That's the first split that I see. But then from there it created fear, a lot of fear. We're so afraid of each other right now,
yeah, yeah.
and it create lack of trust. And so there is so much separation going on right now, so much separation. So yes, all this pain, all this fear, all of that is just incrementing, because it's not just one person, it's like millions and millions of people going through this experience. So you're going to see more of the pain, and that influences the way society, like even right now, just the fact that we were separated, that we first to be separated, it already created a lot of pain. Some people felt abandoned, and some people are completely fear, and in the fear, you're basically your immune system, because you're in fear, you're always in reactive mode, you're in hyper alert, you're in survival. And because you're in survival, I don't know if you, the process of survival, when the body activates the survival mechanism, or the system of survival, it reduces blood from the brain, it reduces blood from the organs, it literally shuts down between 5 to 10% of your organs function, and it goes into the survival mode. And we've been in that mode for the last 3 years.
Wow,
And
wow.
so if your organs are depleted from blood, 5 to 10% of your normal blood is taken out, eventually those kidneys will begin to get sick, those lungs will begin to get sick, because they don't have their normal capacity,
Wow.
right? Because you're in survival. So yes, a lot of illnesses are going to happen because of that. That's at the physical level. At the emotional level, because of all this separation, people are just feeling more lonely, more sick, and it's leading to all this craziness that I see. Like I said, just in my office, from April we went to a huge wave from like April to the whole summer. A lot of teenagers attempting to commit suicide. And it makes sense. Why? Because they were not in school, and they were alone with all these new behavior patterns. It makes sense. Obviously, going back to school helps, but
It distracts you. It keeps you occupied with interaction. Yeah.
exactly. And the kids were like, I mean, one of the kids that I help with, he is a male. And then he's like, well, I don't like feeling this. And I was told that if I could take hormonal supplements, or these drugs to stop the production of my own physical being. And then he became more feminine. And guess what happened?
More emotional.
More emotional. Exactly. He was running away from the emotions that he had as a man, and he took pills, and now he fell more into the emotional female. He just felt 1,000 times worse.
Oh,
And
wow.
he's like, they would tell me I was gonna feel better, but I actually feel worse, because now I can feel more emotions than before. Of
Yeah.
course, And so he was brought here because he was suicidal,
Wow.
right?
Let me,
And I see there's a lot and a lot with teenagers because of the craziness that is happening in the world right now. So yes, we are in.
yeah, I get a lot of emails from people who are contemplating deleting themselves, and I give them the suicide hotline number and tell them to
Yeah,
call it
of
right away.
course.
Because it's people don't. One of the things that other people don't understand is that when you go through depression, it's a very, very tough situation and very bad feeling. And in their minds, there's no other way out than to delete themselves. You know what I mean? They don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And there's nothing that you can say. Sometimes it's caused by a chemical imbalance, other times it's caused by the environment. But I want people to understand there's nothing you really can say, like, get motivated, get up and be
Uh,
happy. You can't. To a
mhm.
person who's going through severe
No,
depression, that does not work.
no.
And with that, I want to discuss a very controversial topic with you. And I call it controversial, it may not be. But I've dealt with this a lot on my channel, and I want your perspective. We were raised in the traditional Western religions, Judaism, Catholicism, you know, and Christianity, of course. And those religions, specifically the preachers and the ministers, always teach if you believe in the Savior, all of your sickness and things will go away.
Yeah.
And I see that as just a band-aid and a very
Mhm.
dangerous thing.
Very dangerous. Yes.
Talk to me about that. What do you think?
It's a hot topic for sure. I actually was having this discussion recently. The problem with that is that what the main focus or the main purpose of that is to teach you or believe that someone else has to do it for you, right? And so the underlying or the secret message or the message to the subconscious is you're not capable of doing this. You're not capable of doing this. You had to depend on someone else, right? And so the feeling behind that is hopelessness. That's a very dangerous position to be in. That's not something I want my kids or myself to ever be in. I want to be able to feel that I'm capable of dealing with something. So though I don't practice any religion right now, but I used to practice Christianity through the LDS or Mormon church, and I don't want to ever be in that position where I had to depend on someone else. I want to be able to feel that I am capable or able to come out of that. And in fact, I have. I've been told so many times I have colon cancer. I have whatever, all kinds of that. I have 6 months to live. In fact, just not too long ago, I was told that I have a brain tumor and all these things. And all of those are little by little, they're gone. I was sort of like, okay, yeah, well, let me go into it, right? We have the power to heal ourselves, all of us. But yes, you're right, unfortunately, those groups specifically, they teach you that you need to depend on someone else, and it's very disempowering for people to be in that position. And the thing is that most people don't question, why do I even believe this, or why do I choose to continue this tradition that it was given to me, and unless we do that, unless we question, we're just repeating patterns and behaviors, and therefore illness and diseases and all these things that happen to us. So it's a very controversial topic, for sure. Very, very controversial topic. But uh, it's just my wish that most people would ask themselves, why do I believe that? Do I want to continue to believe that? Is that where I want to go or continue my life? Because we do have the power to heal ourselves. I mean, just in the Bible, Jesus say, just do what I do and you'll do better than I do. He was literally telling you can do this and more. So yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me? I don't know. It froze, so I'm not sure if you can hear me. Hmm. I think you froze. Yes, it feels like you froze.
Let me read this comment here, which looks pretty interesting. Oh, it's not working. Hold on. Okay. Is there sense of normalcy when it comes to one persona
Yeah.
in society, or how one acts? Let me read that again. Is there a sense of normalcy when it comes to one's persona in society or how one acts? I think the fact this society is based off of trauma causes a lot of problems. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree because again, it goes back to what is acceptable, right? So in society, for example, right now, imagine yourself in the middle of COVID walking around without a mask. What type of feedback did you receive from people? Or, right, even today, no one or a lot of us are not walking with a mask. And when we see someone with a mask, immediately we cast a judgment, right? So yes, we do create trauma because society, it goes back to acceptance. Am I accepted or no? And so we're gonna comply
Yes.
with the
Yeah.
rules. We're
Yeah.
gonna comply with the demands to be accepted. Because again, remember what I say, our number one need about everything that we have is connection. I mean, we come from the womb. We are connected to an umbilical cord. The very first experience that we have is separation, and therefore we want connection. It's our number one need. And so, because we want to belong into society, or we don't want to castricize, or we don't want to be told, "Oh, you don't belong here. You're a weirdo," we're willing to comply. And unfortunately, the problem with this is that the government now knows that. They know that because we're willing to get shots, we're willing to get all those things to comply or to receive a benefit. And so, yes, a lot of trauma, it happens because we had to comply with society, with the expectations of society. And yes, it creates a sense of normalcy because as we see it more and more and more, it becomes normal in our it's acceptable in our mind. I mean, even with movies, you see movies are killing each other, like The Purge. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie The Purge.
No, no, no.
Okay, so it's a movie in which I don't know all the movies, but there's few of them. But the one that I saw is in the government allows the citizens of the country of their plot to kill each other or be like a whole nine of crime
Oh
free.
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I remember that.
I was like, holy cow, the message that they're implanting already in the person or the society is that it's okay to do all those things, right? And all of a sudden, like, of course, there was a movement of excitement because, oh, yeah, we get to be free, but we don't see the consequences of that. Is that you're being programmed. You're being programmed to accept that as a normal. And eventually, when that happens, we will accept it like not a big deal because it's already in our subconscious mind. And the
Mm,
preparation happens like 20 years. The other day, I was watching a movie, The Terminator. I mean, that's a movie that is being, what, like 20, 30 years ago?
yeah.
Right? And in the Terminator, they already had nanotechnology. And I'm like, holy cow, it's always been there in the subconscious.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
today we have it and it is acceptable because it was already in there. It's in our
Yeah.
subconscious mind. So, yes, we create normalcy by seeing things in movies, on videos, on politicals. I mean, all kinds of stuff. We see that programming constantly, 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 and including what we just went through COVID.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
becomes normal.
Yeah. Talk to me. You brought up in the group of good. You had hit upon something when you started talking about the different racial and ethnic groups and how some are more emotional than others. Like I'll give you an example. I noticed in like the African American community, they're very emotional. You know what I mean? And for example, like impulse buying, they buy things, without thinking about it, so I get very concerned when I see this just triggered reaction. Can you talk a little bit about that and the detriments of that?
Yeah, I mean, psychology definitely has. I mean, I remember a class in college. It was nothing but human behavior, or the understanding of human behavior in the context of shopping, right? A whole semester just for that. And so what happens is that because they study our patterns, including, like, remember what I just said, the survival mechanism activates, and then you're more prone to be controllable.
Mm.
So with that, because the data is already there, the commercials, the way that is being presented to you, they already know who they're talking to. For
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
you look at a commercial that is designed for a Hispanic family, they're gonna introduce family, and they're gonna put a lot of stuff that are important to the Hispanic people, right? If they the same commercial they do it in, for example, in Asia, they're gonna talk about how smart or how important it is to be prestigious, because that's what their mind is. So they study the group, right? And based on the group, they produce the commercial that is gonna go to your subconscious.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so when you say they're very impulsive, it's because the way that they speaking, it's almost like you get it now, because if you don't get it now, you're gonna miss it, right? There's
Yes. Yeah.
a sense of
Yeah.
urgency, and so it gets triggered on you, and you're like, man, I gotta get it. And not only that, because they even paint a picture. How would you look like, right? They present the status, and so they play with our psychology. Basically, they play with our psyche, and they
Mm.
study the human. So if you don't study yourself, if you don't, that's where the shadow goes back. If you don't understand why am I behaving the way am I behaving, why do I even say what I just say, everything has a reason. If you don't study yourself, you're gonna be very, very manipulative.
Mm.
Fun
So
through.
how do we start on this journey of shadow work? How do we begin?
You can literally start as simple as, why did I just say that? Why did I feel I have to say that? I mean, literally as simple as that. Or you can start observing, when I'm angry and when I'm upset, when I'm in this emotional reaction, how's my body? How's my body inside? What type of sensations are in my body that I'm going to start identifying as characteristics that are present when I'm in this state of mind, right? And start noticing. For example, another way to find out is like, have you noticed that when I'm talking to mom, I speak in a different way than when I'm talking to my friends? Perhaps I use a different language. Or when I'm, like, for example, right here, right? I had to present to you this persona, this character that is different than when I'm, for example, with my grandbaby, when I'm like soft and cuddly, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
We present different aspects of ourselves. So the question is why? Why? So if you start asking why or how or when, you could start getting to understand more of yourself. Everything has a beginning. And so
Mhm.
most of the time we do it to survive in the context of whatever we're in. So
Mhm.
if you can just begin there, just begin to observe yourself. It's almost like you want to step back and observe yourself from a different perspective, literally split, right? And start watching the self that is presenting to the world. Why do I do that? For
Mhm.
example, why do I like oranges? Do I always like oranges? When did I discover that I like oranges? I don't know. I'm just throwing random stuff, right? Maybe I discovered that I actually hate oranges and I don't know why I eat them, right? So it literally is just a process of observing yourself and trying to understand why and question.
I asked that question the other day because I have ferrets, and I pulled one out of the cage. His name is Jazzy, and I was
Mhm.
talking baby talk to him. I said, "Why am I talking baby talk to him?"
Exactly.
I said,
Exactly.
"What is that about?" But talk about the triggers. What is that? What happens when it goes off? Like, can you explain a little bit more about
Yeah.
that?
So a trigger, basically, I call it, is like a button or a light bulb that it just got activated by something. And triggers can happen through smells. I mean, think of the five senses. We receive information from the world through our five senses. So any of those five senses potentially can be a door for a trigger to be activated in the subconscious, right? A trigger could be anything like, oh, I'm walking down the street and I just passed this bakery restaurant and it smells so good and it just brought me back to grandma's house, and I'm all the way in all this memory, right? That's a positive trigger. But there are also negative triggers. The negative trigger would be something like, which usually happens with sexual abuse. I'm on the street, I'm on the store, I'm on the aisle, and all of a sudden I don't even notice. All of a sudden I start feeling anxiety, and I don't even know why I'm feeling anxiety. And that goes into panic, and I still don't know why. But when we look into it, what happens is, I'm giving you a specific example now. This particular person, when she was at the store and she got all this anxiety and this panicking and she couldn't understand why, what did it was that someone passed by who smelled like, had a perfume of the person who raped her.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And so she didn't consciously understand what was happening. She just went into panic. But when we look into it and we went back to that moment, it was the smell. The brain connected the smell of that person walking by to her experience, which was in the subconscious mind when she was a child. And the only thing that it was that she could that she associated in the moment was the smell. And so triggers can be positive or negative. Yeah.
Mm.
And so it's
How
just
do
an activation.
So how do you get rid of a negative like a situation that is triggered? How do you
So
purge yourself of
that's
that?
when you use different modalities. I mean, there are all kinds of modalities. The one that I work with under my practice, I do completion process, I do parse works, I do timeline therapy, I do hypnosis sometimes if it's too much. It really depends on the person. I'm gonna specialize specific to the person, but it literally is inner child work. Any type of inner child work. You just go back and you revisit. This is where neuroscience takes over, and neuroscience allows us to understand even more the brain. What we see is that for the brain, it has not the brain cannot identify or make the difference between I'm imagining something and something is happening in real life, right? There are studies in which, for example, basketball players were um, study, and half of the team was like, okay, you shoot the basket, you shoot the basket, you practice. And the other side, or the other half of the team was, okay, let's go into a room, close your eyes, and imagining that you shoot in the basket and you hit in the basket, and you're making the basket. At the end, they tested, and they both tested the same, which means the brain thought that the person that was imagining was happening just as much as the person that was actually doing it, right? So we use
Mm.
that principle and we apply it in this type of setting. Okay, so well, let's imagine that we actually rescue you. Let's imagine that somebody comes. Let's say I need a mom there. So let's imagine mom comes and does. We imagine that. So the brain will think, oh, like, oh, this pending chapter of my life is no longer pending because now it's closing. I mean, depending on the pain, some of the pains are like a rape. It will take longer than that. It would be about let's go into the child. Literally, we would have to freeze the scene, freeze the memory, and do something. Or or it would be like literally let's shoot that guy. I mean, it really depends on what the person needs as a healing. Because you'll know, I needed this to happen. I need this person. I needed this situation to be there for me to feel better or not to feel that way. So it is very specific to the person because the subconscious is the one that tells you what you need. It's always about needs, right? And so
Mm.
we just recreate that. We recreate the healing aspect of that. And it's almost like we take a child from one place and we take it to the ideal or desired outcome. And we just take it from one place to the other. That's on the mental and emotional work. At the physical level, once you come back, you may have to um, change behaviors. You may have to even change houses. You may have to, like, for example, right now, when my brother, I was talking about my brother. The thing that he needs to go back and do is get rid of anything that he doesn't use in the house for more than 1 year. That was his assignment. Why? Because it's letting go. It's letting go of all the accumulation stuff that is in the house for 20, 30 years that he never used. And is building and occupying a space, just like in the mind, stuff that is there occupying a space. So, as above, so below, the same principle applies here. As he goes and cleans the house, the message to the subconscious is time to clean up.
Mm.
Yeah. So, we do all kinds of techniques and modalities to help send a message to the unconscious mind to clean and to let go. That is time.
Tell me about, because I did a lot of research on my past life. I discovered where I was, and one of the things I discovered was that I was alone for a large period of time in my past life, and I realized that I always had this fear of being alone in this life.
Yeah.
So, can you talk about these traumas that come from past lives? Like
Yeah. So it gets a little complicated, right? Because there's so much. But we definitely think of it this way. If you think of exiting the previous life through a blue door, there's no way you're gonna come through a green door. You have to come back through a blue door because a blue door equals what you left, right? So you always come back in the same frequency or energy that you left because you're you're coming back to either expand from that or to transcend that. right? Or to finish the experience of whatever it is. If in your past life you felt so much loneliness and that kind of pain in after that life you set out the intention to I need to come and transcend that, then you had to come in loneliness and therefore bring people, or you had to come with people so that you become aware that the opposite is the pain, right?
Hmm.
So yes, we do bring some of the pains from other experiences in potentially living in our ancestors. Like for example, this morning I was driving I was driving on the freeway and I had the thought of a specific person and I said, well, that person's no longer in my life a while back. I wonder what's going on with that person, right? And part of me knew that the person wasn't doing good. And part of me felt joy. No joy, but it felt good. And I was like, whoa, where is that coming from? Why would I want someone to
Yeah.
do pain? And that part of me say, because that person needs to know my value. And now that I'm not in the life, the person hopefully will see how important I was in his life when I was there, right? And that was just an aspect of me. But then I was like, wait a minute, why do I feel that way? And then I saw that my mom did the same behavior. And guess what? My grandma did the same behavior. And so this becomes an ancestral or potentially past life because, we usually tend to repeat roles. So that could be me 3 generations ago. And now today I am feeling the same feeling. So that means it's a reminder for me to look into the pattern and potentially change the pattern or break the pattern, right? So it becomes so if you see something, what I would suggest, if you see something in your ancestral line, in your ancestors, and it's a pattern that you have it that they have, most likely it's a past life
Mm. So,
situation.
we had talked about the ancestral curses,
Mhm.
and you gave me a really good understanding and definition of what that is. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So it goes back to what I'm explaining, right? It becomes a curse because many generations in our family are repeating the same thing. And we call it a curse because this is like, for example, the very thing that I just explained. I felt the almost like a part of me wanted some sort of revenge that this person was not doing good because that would mean that I have value and therefore the person will finally see my value, right?
Hmm.
But like I say, that was just a part of me. But also my mother had the part, and also my grandma had the part. So that's like at least 100 years. And guess what? Most likely, my grandma's mother or father, someone had that pattern. But being in the fact that it's all in the female line so far in 3 generations, most likely was her mom. And so
Mm.
that would be considered a family curse
Okay,
because
that
all
makes
of
sense.
us had the same pain, right?
Hmm.
And so it's one of us has to break the pattern. Clearly, right now that I'm become aware, it's going to be me, right? Because
Right.
I became aware of it this morning. I was like, wow, now I had to look into why. And it has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with worth and value because the pain behind that idea of, well, I hope he's not doing good because I want him to know my value has to do with value. So that means it's my pain. In what ways I don't feel worthy or in what ways I don't feel valuable. I had to look at that pain. The other person was just being used to reflect something about me.
Oh, right, right, right. Yeah, I get that. Yeah,
Yeah. And
makes
so I
sense.
had to look at that. And if I can break that, my daughter or my granddaughter doesn't have to deal with that. Yeah.
But why doesn't because these things they can go on for generations. Why don't we see it and do something about it? Why does people just accept dysfunctionalism? I don't
Exactly.
get that.
Exactly. Because we just accept it and we don't question. And so I mean, literally, what people can do, like your audience can do, is like literally look at their behavior and say, how much of my behavior is actually a pattern that I see my parents or my grandparents doing? And once you identify that they do, then it's as ancestral, it's a generational thing. So, do you want to be the one to break it? Do you want to be the one? Because we tend to think of ourselves as individuals. We don't think to look at our family line and say, wait, what about my family line is in me? We don't think like that. We
Mm,
only think of the self, right? It's only when you look back and you look at your ancestors that you say, how much of me is actually them?
yeah, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
And that's why we accept it and we continue because we don't look back and see how many ancestors have felt this pain.
And I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to dysfunctional relationships, like women getting with men, men getting with women, that they don't see it because they tend to push it to the background. They don't deal with it or as you say, look at themselves objectively, because they're always projecting that it's the other person, it's not
Mhm.
them. You know what I mean? This is why, sometimes I see a lot of women who get involved in like abusive relationships. I'm like, well, you keep getting into relationships with guys who physically abuse you, so you're not looking at something in terms of your choices,
Mhm.
and and they just keep going, and it transfers over to their daughters and their
And we
sons.
do this. Yeah, we do this. In fact, I had yeah, about a week or so ago, I had a couple, right? And their dynamic is like they fight, they on the weekends they make up, they fight, they live separate, right? And I say that's fine. The problem is that your kids are watching that, and so your kids are watching the violence, and the kids are watching how that on the weekends is okay. And so the problem is that the child is learning that that is the way of relationships. So when that child grows up, that child's going to think that is okay to be in a relationship like that because that's what I saw growing up,
Yeah,
right? And so we don't learn how to have healthy relationships. I mean, we don't. 95% of the relationships are toxic relationships, are dysfunctional relationships. 95%. That's
yeah,
a lot, right? And so we think it's normal. And so if we can only learn to have relationships, meaning to see into the other person, to feel into the other person, to understand the other person, and to meet the most of the time the conflicts in relationships happens because one person A has their reality, person B has their reality, and they're fighting to you need to see my reality, you need to see my way, you need to see my way, instead of me going there and say, let me see what you see from your reality, right? Once I understand, well, how does it look like, how does it feel like, how does it feels here, then now I need you to come and see it from my personal perspective and see it from free. Once we understand that, then how can we both, because we're clearly in different pages, how can we both then create an alternative reality where both of us can benefit from it versus pulling the other one towards each other's realities? And we don't do that. We argue for our point to be right, and the other person argues for their point to be right, instead of like literally jumping in the reality and say, what is your reality? Let me see, let me understand your reality so that I can see why you're thinking that way or
yeah.
why you feel that way. We don't do that, and that would be the healthiest way to have reality, I mean to relationships, is to understand the other person, and in that moment decide, you know what, actually your reality is completely different than mine. I know it's not, it doesn't go with my boundaries, doesn't go with my expectations, doesn't go with my principles or values. I can be in a relationship with you, but only after understanding the reality. Or I get it now, I see that because of this trauma or this experience, what you really need is this, let me help you with that. And now that I do that, can we have this? Yeah. But it literally is no different than a therapist that needs to jump in the client's reality to see and understand it so that we can help them.
Mm. I'm, it's interesting because I'm also into hypnotherapy. When do you decide to use that as a means of healing?
So it depends on the person. Some people are like beyond, they had the walls so much that they're not willing to go into their emotions. I literally just relax them, and in the middle of the hypnosis, I'll do the process. Like
Uh,
the subconscious listens, right? So once because what causes the block is the conscious self, the ego self. It wants to be right. It wants to know that I know what to do. And it's the same ego that protects the walls of no, you cannot get through me, or the ego, the same walls that are like I'm laughing when I'm like telling you my pain and I just got hurt and my leg is broken, but I'm laughing about it because I can't show you my pain. That's also a wall, a protector, right? When
mhm.
all that's happening, the only thing that I do is obviously earn the person's trust first and foremost, but then under the hypnosis, I literally go in and direct them to do what I wouldn't want them to do, under awakening self.
Uh,
I would just direct that during the hypnosis. So it really depends on the person. That's where your skills comes. You have to see the person in front of you and see what is it that they need, or how can I serve them best? How can I serve them best? Yeah.
mm.
Sometimes I have to tell people, you're not ready for this work. I'm sorry. I'm not the one that's going to help you.
Those are extreme cases, is it?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Sometimes I tell people, literally, this is not for you. Your
mm,
your 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 resistance is beyond. I'm not the one that is going to help you. Why? Because if your life is Like, for example, let's say you come to me and I say, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to get your job. We need to get this. We need to get this. And you go home and you go back into the black hole and you do nothing. You don't look for the job. You don't do none of that. And then you come back to, well, why I feel this way? And then we find the pain, but you still go back to the misery that you're in. Why would the inner child want to show you their pain if you're doing nothing in your current life? So that's why it needs to always be three components: the emotional, the mental, and the physical. The physical
Mhm.
needs to start taking action in the real life, like including, for example, as simple as this: someone comes to see me for a smoke, they want to quit smoking. I'll like, we look for the emotion that they're escaping, for which they're smoking or soothing themselves with the smoking, and we do that. But now I say, now you had to go home, in that place where you usually smoke, you had to remove that place. Let's say they usually have a chair or a couch or something outside. Not all the time, but the case that comes to mind. This person had a chair in the balcony with a little table and everything where this person would smoke every day, right? After doing the emotional work in the hypnosis part, I say you need to remove that table from the balcony. You need to break that because in your mind, that's what you do already every time you go there. So you had to change the environment because the brain saves energy, and to save energy automatizes everything. So if every time I step into the balcony my brain already knows that that's where I smoke and therefore I had to produce the desire to smoke, it's going to be there if I don't break it. I had to break
Mhm.
the pattern. So I had to go into the balcony, remove the table, remove all the stuff, and change the environment to look something different, so my brain is not programmed to automatically produce the desire to smoke, because that's what I did the last 20 years.
Wow. Yeah.
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 So you had to break the pattern. And so I tell people usually go home and change something in your room, especially for depression. Because you go and if you get depressed in your room, as soon as you walk in, even if you had a great time outside, as soon as you walk into your room, immediately the feeling goes in. And you're like, how come I feel great outside, but in my home, I don't feel? But that's because you haven't changed a thing in the house. So you had to move the furniture around, you had to break the pattern.
Mm.
Yeah.
That makes a
Always,
lot of sense. Yeah, that
always
makes a
think
lot of
mind,
sense.
body, spirit, three minds, always. You had to work with the three, not just with one. The problem with most functions out there, like psychology, only focus on one, right? Like the positive focus only focus on one, but you had to work with all three: conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. Mind, body, spirit. You always had to work with the three
That's excellent. That's
so
excellent.
that you can do an alignment. And in alignment, then things begin to change.
And I like how you said that you tailor your therapy to the needs of the person, so you
Yes.
don't just have a fixed way of dealing with this.
Yeah, no, every person is different.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here, but I want to thank you, and I want you to let people know how they can get in contact with you if they want a session or want to find out more information about what you do.
Thank you, thank you. So my practice is called SAVE with a V. I have the problem pronouncing that. SAVE Hypnotherapy, and they can just Google. Anytime on Google, my website is savehypnotherapy.help, or they can just look it up. My name, literally, you Google my name and everything shows up. Yeah, so I'm in here in Las Vegas. I work in person or online. I have clients all over the world. So
Oh.
that's not a problem. I can do hypnosis even over the computer. It's not a problem as long as you're in a couch or a bed, you're okay. While driving, I don't see people while driving or anything like that. You had to like literally be present for you to be focused on here. But definitely, if you're ready to change, if you're ready to find out the reasons why and understand yourself, this is the work. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to change it, you just want to understand, this is no. I'm not the one, because this work requires commitment and it requires changes, literally
Yeah.
physical changes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes, I noticed that certain people are at a point where they're not ready to change, and other people are ready to change because they've been through so much hell. They're like,
Yeah.
I'm just done with this. I need to change. And also, you're going to be at my retreat You'll be speaking there, the Las Vegas Spiritual Retreat it's going to be the weekend of the 15th, 16th, and 17th. So if you guys haven't signed up, the URL is below. You can see that scrolling past. Sign up, and Norma will be there to talk a little bit more. And you also will have an opportunity to sign up for a session with her. So Norma, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It's been very, very insightful. I'd definitely like to invite you back to talk a little bit more deeper. All right. So thank you. Take care.
Absolutely. I'll see you around. Take care. Bye.
So that was just awesome. And, there's so many people out there that need help, need therapy, and that could be you. We always think that we're okay, and that may not be the case. And you need to ask questions like Norma was saying. Why do I do that? Why do I think that way? It's very important. But for now, I want to thank you for tuning in. And remember, like if you tuned into this broadcast, you know that there's some things that aren't right, whether it be with the world or you, and you're close to wanting to make that change. And that's a good thing. And you need to kind of like celebrate that and give yourself a pat on the back for that, because a lot of people, they just don't want to face the situation that may not be all right, or the world may not be all right. So thank you for tuning in. This is Qesankh Ma Keparu, son of Ma'at and Tahuti. Ma'at is the beautiful goddess Heteru. Until my next video, I'm in Ra.